the roadblock holding up Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche from permanently taking over the role may now be no longer. Blanche essentially did what two Republicans have been demanding for weeks, which is put it in writing that President Trump's so-called anti-weaponization fund is formally ended and fully dead. Blanche released a one-page memo stating that he is formally rescinding it. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have criticized the $1.8 billion fund, calling it a slush fund that could have been used to pay out January 6th defendants. Thom Tillis just this weekend called it a payout pot for punks. And fellow Republican John Cornyn, were the key senators to withhold their support over this issue and holding up the nomination entirely. So now the key Senate committee that must approve Blanche's nomination to get it to move forward, that committee is expected to meet tomorrow. CNN's Elena Trian is live at the White House this morning with much more. The question remains, this saga has had so many twists and turns, it's hard to say a done deal is a done deal until it's actually done. What's your assessment?
Yeah, look, I think there have been days, Kate, as you know, of frenzied negotiations over how to try and push through Blanche's nomination. And now the administration believes that they do have a deal to do that and to move forward. And you did see one of these key Republican senators who has been holding out on this, Senator John Cornyn. He even announced as well overnight that they have reached a deal. So we really do have to see whether or not this is enough, not only for the committee, but then, of course, if it gets through the Judiciary Committee, a key question as well will be, will all of the Senate Republicans who need to vote for this, will they move forward with this as well? Will this be enough? Now, as you mentioned, late last night, Blanche, currently the acting attorney general, he issued a formal document stating that the order creating that controversial $1.8 billion weaponization fund is being formally rescinded. This is exactly what Tillis and Cornyn wanted. He wrote specifically that my team and I have met with committee members and senators over the past several weeks and addressed any concerns or outstanding questions. We've enjoyed good faith discussions and as a result issue the following order and update with regard to the May IRS settlement. In these documents that are in that post that you see on your screen right now, they say that the weaponization fund is, quote, rescinded with no force or effect. Now, again, getting into Cornyn and Tillis, I'd remind you that this wasn't something a lot of people in the White House believed would be a huge issue. Blanche had previously said that this order was essentially this $1.8 billion weaponization fund was not going to happen, that they were not going to move forward with it. But these holdout senators, both people, of course, who Trump had previously essentially ousted out of the Senate come after these midterm elections, they had said they wanted this formally in writing. That is what this big document, this big news that Blanche posted last night really gets at, trying to get them over the line with this being a formal order now. Now, I will say the move comes, of course, after we heard from the president over the weekend issuing threats that if Blanche was not pushed through, if his nomination was not confirmed, that he would consider reviving this $1.8 billion weaponization fund. I want you to listen to what he told reporters just yesterday as he was returning on Air Force One.
Look, we have a man named Todd Blanche. He's outstanding in every way. Most of you know who he is. You're not going to find a better person. And everybody agreed. And it's because I backed Cornyn's opponent, and his opponent won in a landslide. That's the only reason it's happening. A lot of people like it. If they don't approve Todd, I put it back on the table. A lot of people like it. A lot of big supporters of Trump like it.
So those comments, Kate, really throwing some of a wrench in some of the messaging from the Trump administration, showing that the president clearly still believes in this fund, believing that there are people who deserve this money, including some of those who were at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. One other quick thing is that the document released Sunday by Blanche also shows that they are having an addendum to the agreement, that there's a tax part of this, IRS thing, that the IRS will not go over past taxes. He makes in writing clear that agreement will only be retroactive, another thing Cornyn had really been pushing for.
It was interesting watching Cornyn say, we would have worked this out on our own, because that's very Cornyn, like he's a very institution guy, and Tillis being like, go ahead, try me again. Why do you think the president keeps pushing this particular issue, even as the backlash is strong enough to prevent like a lot of things are moving forward.
Because I think he knows two things can be true at once. That this issue is great for his base. It's his way of saying, come out, support me at all costs, and I'll make sure I take care of you. Remember, there was concerns that this fund could be used to compensate, for example, those that were arrested on January 6th. And on the other end of the spectrum, the other thing that can be true is that it could be putting pressure on his pick for AG. But I think he knows that he can have the rhetoric go one way, and he can have negotiations go another. And guess what, Audie? That seems to be what's happening.
It does, because Cornyn kind of got what he wants here. They posted this note saying that this anti-weaponization fund, which again was a deal that was only worked out between Trump and the Justice Department directly as a settlement, right? So there's always been this question of whether or not Blanche, as his former personal attorney, is the right person to have this conversation. The thing that's interesting is if you actually look in the document, it pretty much says all parties have to agree to changes, which would include Trump. So help me understand how this is going to work.
Well, look, I think the anti-weaponization fund was a terrible idea. The Department of Justice has the ability to give compensation for people who they feel have been wrongly prosecuted already. This was going to be divisive for a lot of people. Most Americans, Sarah noted, don't want to be funding people who assaulted, beat up police on January 6th. I think what's going to be interesting here is that I think there are a lot of senators who are probably hiding behind Tillis and Cornyn, and they wanted them to be out front. And now that Blanche has met their objections, will other senators step forward, or are they going to now fall in line as well?
Well, there's always the IRS bit, right? According to the documents, he says that the DOJ agreement does not give the president or his family blanket immunity from future tax investigations. Clarification, it's simply an agreement to not pursue any more legal action on the original tax case that led to the settlement. So lots of these legal language changes. Are they enough?
Well, I mean, I think that's the IRS settlement was what Trump really wanted out of the deal. I mean, he's got this pattern of presenting sort of two very egregious ideas, and and the media and Republicans and Democratic opposition lobbing onto one, sort of shielding the real his real intent, which is this IRS settlement. The one thing I find very interesting about all of this is it all really plays in to the Democrats' advantage. It plays directly into our hands. The more that the president continues to focus on, on providing settlement for those who attack the Capitol and attack police officers, and trying to shield his family from any sort of future liability, really distracts from what people are really most concerned with. CNN recently put out a poll that showed that 74% of the American people believe that the president is not focused on their priorities. He's mostly focused on himself. And this is another example of that. So
what
the more
if
we
he
focus on this, the more it
made
plays
more
our
little
advantage.
changes for the people who are hiding? I'm going to play for you John Kennedy of Louisiana. And he had been saying before this Cornyn deal came out that he wasn't sure about this idea of a bill, some kind of legislation to create the fund instead of the settlement. Here's what he had to say.
The president himself has conceded that it will take legislation. I'm glad he conceded that. We'll get to shape the bill. If he wants to improve it, I'm willing to look at it, but I'm not going to give him a blank check.
Do you think anyone who attacked police officers, stormed the Capitol on January 6th should get taxpayer money as a part of that fund?
No, I'd take them off the table.
So is it just the January 6th bit? And Mark, I have to ask you, you used to work for Vice President Pence, Chief of Staff. Do you think people would get behind it if they just took off the January 6th pardoned people?
I think that the January 6th part is what is most offensive to a lot of voters.
Bipartisan offensive,ness, you think?
Yeah, but I think that actually there's a lot of Republicans uncomfortable with that too. It's not just a Democrat discomfort. So yeah, I think that's the most objectionable part. But again, I think that there's a lot of questions and other questions around this nomination, and so I think, will this all come out this week, or will this sort of announcement last night in the middle of the night on Sunday night sort of put this to bed and allow Cornyn and Tillis to step aside?
I'm starting the week assuming this nomination is going to go through eventually, but is that not the scuttlebutt in the text?
No, I absolutely think that this is going to go through. And also remember, the two senators that we're holding up here, neither of them are facing re-election, right? So at this point, they have so much wiggle room to be able to say and do what they want to go after. But ultimately, they don't want their legacies either to be the ones that blocked President Trump's hand-picked nominee for Attorney General. So they're in a contentious position themselves.
Yeah.